America, our government, why it works, how it works, and how you can be a part of it today on The Ms. Meyer Show.
Goes. No need to ask why. Just open your mouth and close your eyes.
Okay, there are various types of government in our world. America, is a representative democracy. Now, every single country that is in our great planet is not that way. There are several types of governments that work around, that we have in play today, and we're going to go over them one by one. The first one that we're going to go over is a democracy. In America, we have a democracy. It's what our forefathers fought for. It's what they wanted. It was, our whole basis of America and why we formed this country was to create this democracy.
Yeah, we are ready to administer the oath of office, sir.
I am at your service.
General, if you will please place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I, George Washington, do solemnly swear.
I, George Washington, do solemnly swear
That I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
that I will faithfully execute the office of the United States.
And will, to the best of my ability,
To the best of my ability.
preserve, protect, and defend
Preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
the Constitution of the United States. So help me, God.
It is done. God bless George Washington, President of the United States.
Finally.
Now, there are several types of democracies that we have. There's a direct, an indirect, and a representative democracy. A direct democracy pretty much is a democracy where every single person is going to vote on every single thing. Like I've told you guys before, there is no possible way that you would be able to do this. If you did this and we voted on every single solitary thing that they had, in play, we would do absolutely nothing else but vote. We would not be able to go to school. We wouldn't be able to go to work. We wouldn't be able to do anything else. All we would do would be voting. So what we have in our country is a representative democracy where we elect people to speak on our behalf.
When you have 9 children, you're bound to have one who's hard-headed.
Dad, you're one to talk.
I know how BP felt when Mary fought to get billions for Louisiana.
It was their mess.
And when she took on the president to approve the Keystone Pipeline.
It means high-paying jobs for Louisiana.
And now as chairman of the Energy Committee, those other senators better get ready.
Oh, they are.
And now you know why Putin won't let her into Russia.
I'm Mary Landrieu, and I approve this message.
There's also the monarchy, was another type of government, and that is one where there's a king or queen in play. Now, in today's society, there are very, very few absolute monarchies. And what an absolute monarchy is, it is basically where the king and queen rules everything. Queen Elizabeth, my BFF. I love the Miss Moya show. Y'all know that. She is basically a figurehead. She has absolutely no say in the government of the UK. She really doesn't. They are now, who makes the decisions? They're a democracy just like us. The people who make the decisions are parliament members. The people of Great Britain elect those parliament members. Now, way back in the day, like King Henry VIII, there were actually even a little bit before King Henry VIII, like King James and all of the, way back when, the UK was ruled by, an absolute monarch, the king and the queens and all that kind of stuff. As time went on, that stopped. Eventually, even on the time of like King Henry VIII, there was a constitutional monarchy where it was not only the king or the queen, but it was also members of parliament who made decisions. Example, when King Henry VIII wanted to divorce his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Now, Henry and Catherine had been married for some time, and she was getting a little old, and Henry was as well, and he needed to have an heir, a son, to give the throne to. Women, he couldn't give it to a daughter. He wanted to give it to a son. Well, Catherine was getting really old, and it was quite obvious that she could no longer have kids. So Henry decided that the only way that he was going to, be able to have kids and have an heir would be to divorce her. So he wanted to divorce her, but the parliament members, the members of the, the members of the parliament said, no, you can't do this. You cannot do this. It's against our church. It's against all this kind of stuff. So he had to kind of configure a way to divorce Catherine so that he could marry his second wife, Anne Boleyn, but she had a lovely fate as well.
Henry had so many wives that had to die. Henry had so many, only one survived. 6 wives in all the things they could do if they hadn't married Henry, that was their downfall. The first was Catherine by name, she was from Aragon in Spain. Oh, poor Kate. She married Arthur, Henry's bro, and when he died, loved Henry so. Had to wait. Took her as his lawful wife, but that cost caused her a lot of strife. She couldn't have a son, you see, their only child was Mary. Henry, Henry, Henry had so many wives that had to die. Henry, Henry, Henry had so many, only one survived. 6 wives in all the things they could do if they hadn't married Henry, that was their downfall. Most infamous was Anne Boleyn, but from the start she couldn't win. Well, of course, she was attracted to the king, though wouldn't love unless a queen. So by divorce, she promised Henry a male heir, but had Elizabeth with red hair. I have a little neck, she said, right before they chopped her head. Henry, Henry, Henry had so many wives that had to die. Henry, Henry, Henry had so many, only one survived. 6 wives in all the things they could do if they hadn't married Henry, that was their downfall. Jane Seymour was the next to wed, betrothed the day and lost her head. No one did mourn. She loved the king and tried with might, and so much to the king's delight. A son was born. Edward was a true blessing, long awaited by the king. But soon afterwards Jane would die, and poor Henry was left to cry. Henry, Henry, Henry had so many wives that had to die. Henry, Henry, Henry had so many, only one survived. 6 wives in all the things they could do if they hadn't married Henry, that was their downfall. Anna of Cleves from Germany would be the next wife for Henry. She would not last. A Lutheran princess though she be, he didn't like her face, you see. And known her fast, nicknamed her the Flanders mare. Divorced her without a care. She stayed in England and became the king's beloved sister in name. Henry, Henry, Henry had so many wives that had to die. Henry, Henry, Henry had so many, only one survived. 6 wives in all the things they could do if they hadn't married Henry, that was their downfall. Henry would be wed again to a cousin of Anne Boleyn. Catherine Howard, a rose without a thorn, said he, but her affair forced her to be sent to the Tower. Culpeper was her cousin dear, and her love, so it appeared, this was high treason, and so Kate upon the block did meet her fate. Henry, Henry, Henry had so many wives that had to die. Henry, Henry, Henry had so many, only one survived. 6 wives in all the things they could do if they hadn't married Henry, that was their downfall. wife by far. Number 6 cared for Elizabeth and Ed and old Henry's ulcered leg. He was sick after the king had passed away. She got remarried right away, but in a year she left this earth, had some trouble giving birth. Henry had so many wives that had to die. Henry had so many, only one survived. Three kings had one precious Jane, but they had to marry Henry, and it sealed their fate.
So that's a constitutional monarchy, okay? Basically where you have parliament and the king and queen who make decisions. An absolute monarchy is where you just have the king or queen that makes decisions, okay? Like Elsa on Frozen, that is an absolute monarchy. Queen Elsa is the one that makes all the decisions. Okay, that's an absolute monarchy when it's just one person. Constitutional monarchy is where you have a group of people that are elected to make some decisions along with the king and queen. Okay, next we have what is called an oligarchy. And an oligarchy is where you have a couple of people, like maybe 3 or 4, that rule the entire country. An example of this was in ancient Rome, before Julius Caesar became the extreme dictator, there were 3 people, the triumvirate, who controlled Rome. And that's an oligarchy. Oligarchy, like think of a circle, like O, and you got a couple of people that make the circle, a couple of people who form government. No? Well, whatever, I don't care. Whatever works best for you, okay? The next one we have is a totalitarian government or a dictatorship. And that's where you have one person who is in control of everything. And that person is not a king or queen. Kind of like Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, all of the people that have just one person in control. Saddam Hussein, things like that. That is a totalitarian or an authoritative or a dictator. That's one person. So let's recap. We have the different types of government. We have a democracy, which is America, and there are 2 types of democracy, a direct and an indirect or representative democracy. Direct democracy is where the people vote on every single thing. Indirect or representative democracy is where we have people who represent us. We have the monarchy, which is 2 different types, the constitutional and the absolute. The absolute monarchy is the monarchy where the king and queen are the sole ruler of that country. Then the constitutional monarchy is where you have the king and queen along with a constitution and some parliamentary or representatives that were elected by the people. Then you have an oligarchy, which is a group of people who make the decisions. And then you have the totalitarian or dictatorship, where is that one person who makes all the decisions. Okay, so here in the United States, we operate on the idea of federalism. And what federalism is, it's basically an idea that a group of people or a country per se operates and is bound by a document. In our case, it is the Constitution. The Constitution of the United States was put into place, before the American Revolution was kind of finalized. It was finalized, after it. And it basically said that as Americans, we have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that Constitution is the key, the bedrock of the United States, even to this day. We talked about the separation of powers and about the legislative, the judicial, and the executive branch. We know that the judicial branch, the Supreme Court judges, their purpose is to assess whether or not the actions of the other two branches, which are the legislative and the executive, are making decisions that go for or against the United States Constitution. So it's a huge deal is our Constitution. Now we can make what are called amendments to the Constitution. No, times are changing, guys, and so the Constitution kind of has to change with it as well. When the Constitution was written, women were not allowed to vote. We weren't allowed to sometimes own property. It was different situations. There was slavery in our country. So there was a lot of changes that we need to make to the Constitution as time goes on. The way that those changes are made is by instituting something called an amendment. When you want to amend something, that means you want to add something to it. The new iPhones, they constantly coming out. The new one was this iPhone 6? They're amending stuff to the iPhone. They're adding stuff. Well, I personally think it's a joke, and I wouldn't spend all that money for just a bigger screen and some fancy doodads. That's what it is. They're amending it. The Constitution is the same thing. As time goes on, America changes. Goals change. Things change. So in order to change it is to add it to our Constitution. The Constitution would hold us firm as a country. And so when we decide that something is important enough to, affect the lives of everyday citizens in the United States, they add those as amendments to our Constitution. Some huge amendments to our Constitution two huge ones were the 13th Amendment, and this abolished slavery, and the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote. So those issues were not part of the original Constitution. That's because what I said, like what I told you, when the Constitution was originally written, women were not allowed to vote, and slavery was legal. As times changed after the Civil War, the 13th Amendment was added to our Constitution, completely getting rid of slavery.
I think we choose to be born, or we fitted to the times we're born into. We begin with equality. It's the origin, isn't it? That's justice.
See, we've shown that a people can endure awful sacrifice and yet cohere. Shall we stop this bleeding?
Abolishing slavery settles the fate for millions now in bondage and unborn millions to come.
It's either the amendment or this Confederate peace. You cannot have both.
No one's loved as much as you by the people. Don't waste that power.
How many hundreds of thousands have died during your administration?
We must cure ourselves of slavery. This amendment is that cure.
God help us for trapping you in a marriage that's only ever given you grief.
The fate of human dignity is in our hands. Blood's been spilled to afford us this moment. Now! Now! Now!
Never trusted the president, never trusted anyone.
The war will be over in a month.
Tell Lincoln to deny the rumors.
We are guaranteed to lose the whole thing.
Leave the Constitution alone.
You insult God. You think they'll keep their promise?
I am the President of the United States of America, clothed in immense power.
Rated PG-13. In theaters everywhere, November 16th.
Now, what's interesting about that was that when the 13th Amendment was put into place as part of our Constitution, it was during the Civil War. So you would think, you'd say like, okay, well, if they're saying here that in the Constitution, that slavery is abolished, it's no longer going to be a part of the United States, it's there in the Constitution, why didn't the South, the Confederate Army, why didn't they listen? It's right here in the Constitution. Well, when that amendment was written and added to the Constitution, it was during the Civil War. And one of the first things that the South did during the Civil War was secede from the United States. And that means they broke away from the United States and they formed their own country called the Confederate States of America. And since they saw that they were no longer a part of the United States of America, they did not have to listen to anything that another foreign country's constitution says. So that's why they did not listen to the 13th Amendment. Okay? So what is the purpose of a constitution? Why do we even have it? And it is protect you and me. You know, when we became a country, when we first started this United States of America, we really didn't have a lot of protection. We were subjects of the British Crown. We didn't have anybody representing us in Parliament over there. And we feel like we really didn't have a say. So when our founding forefathers decided that they were going to start this nation, they were going to start it right. And they were going to start it with a constitution. Basically a rule, a list of laws, a list of following things and ideas that this country is going to follow and base itself on. It's protect you and me. It's to establish limits on those who govern. We were so fearful after the American Revolution that we too would somehow become this monarchy or this totalitarian government. We wanted to be sure that we were always a government for the people and by the people. And by establishing this Constitution, it put limits and terms on those leaders who are in place. We have time limits. A president can only be a president for at max 8 years, even though FDR did it a little bit longer. So, you know, when you go run for office, you can only run for office for a set time limit. After that, you can't do it anymore. No one can run constantly. It cannot be like that. It's protecting you. It's protecting someone from having too much power. We have the system of checks and balances that protect us from having one branch from having too much power. It promotes social order for the common good. Like when they established the 13th Amendment and got rid of slavery. That was for the betterment of the people. When they instituted the 19th Amendment and gave women the right to vote. That was for the betterment of the people. So the Constitution has been written for you. It's to protect you and me in this country. How do we fund our government? How do we fund things in the United States? You are attending a public school. You're one of the first groups of kids, really, to attend school via the internet with this awesome teacher right here sending you videos and teaching you through the computer. How are you funding? How is that funded? How is that put into place? How are you given textbooks and other materials that you may need? This is not a private school, so there's no tuition. This is open to everyone. How do we pay for that? Taxes. Now, a lot of people, taxes is a big, touchy subject. It's, can really create lots and lots of friction. I have learned the hard way never to discuss politics among people that you just meet, because you don't know what everybody believes, and it can really easily get into a heated argument. Now, the taxes that we have in our country are put into place basically to run our country. You need, to have that financial, money coming in so that you can run a successful country. So let's say that we were starting a club. We were starting, we all wanted to start this club where we were going to, once a month, go do something that's really, really fun. Like go bowling or laser tag, and go have pizza beforehand and, maybe show a movie, go to the movies, just do something really fun once a month as 8th graders. And we're going to do that. Now, that's a great idea, but it costs money. It costs money to buy the tickets for laser tag, to buy the movie admission tickets, to buy the popcorn, to get the pizza, to pay for transportation. It all costs money. How would we raise that money? Well, we would ask people maybe to contribute a little bit. Each member to give maybe $4 or so. My daughter...
Don't tell me what to do!
...has a fall fest coming up, and I just got a letter in her folder that said we would like to create some kind of themed basket for everybody to raffle, for us to raffle away. Can you please send in $2? Well, that's kind of like a tax. They're asking me to give a little bit of my money so that they could do something for the greater good of the school, is basically do this basket. Well, that's what a tax is for us in our country as well. Now, people may argue that that's not always the way that it happens. You give the money and sometimes politicians' pockets get lined, especially in the case of Louisiana politics with good old Huey Long and Earl Long, Edward Edwards, and Ray Nagin. And so on and so on. But Louisiana politics is very, very colorful. But the main reason we have taxes is so that we can pay for things. We can pay for libraries and to fix the roads. Although in New Orleans, you wouldn't believe it when you have to drive through some of the potholes. It's also to fund hospitals and schools, firehouse stations, police salaries, teachers' salaries. The taxes go to keep your government running, to keep that in place. Now, like I said, it's a very hot button issue because there are many other things that are paid for by your taxes, along with those basic necessities. Things like social programs, food stamps, welfare, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Those are all social help programs to help people. A lot of people, that's where it gets touchy. That's where it's a real touchy subject. Some people say we should give more money. Some people say we should give less money. Some people say that everyone should have to pay the exact same amount. And some people say that if you make more money, you should pay more than the person that doesn't make as much money. So like I said, it's a very hot button issue. But what I want you guys to do is I want you to stop being spectators. I want you to start being an actual, participant. Understand the whole thing. Understand when people are talking and what their, politics, because you guys are going to, in a couple of years, you'll be voting. You'll be 18. You'll be able to vote. So you need to pay attention to what goes on. And I firmly believe that even though that you're just in 8th grade, you still have an opinion and that people should listen to you and you should be able to express your opinion in a very educated manner and start to kind of say, hey, I've got an opinion about taxes as well. This is what I think, because you do have an opinion. Now what I'm going to do is give you a little reenactment of why America decided that taxes was what was going to spur us into the American Revolution. Take a look. Great Britain has a constitutional monarchy, meaning they have parliamentary members that are elected by the people, and they also have the king. Okay, so all of these people represent the people of Great Britain. Well, during the American Revolution, before the American Revolution, they had some British colonists that were over in America. And even though they were living in North America at that time, they were still considered British subjects. So, all of our parliamentary members would get together with our king, and they would come up with rules and taxes and laws and things that needed to be passed. Well, these parliamentary members would speak for these people right here. But notice, there's no one speaking for our little colonists. There's nobody speaking on their behalf. So what kind of laws and what kind of rules and what kind of taxes do you think were put into place? Taxes that benefited these ponies, not these poor guys. Taxes like the tea tax, the stamp tax, a tax on paper goods, the Townshend Acts, all of these things that impacted these poor colonists. Things that these British subjects never had to deal with because they were represented in Parliament by representatives. That's why we see the very famous saying by Patrick Henry that says, all right, so these people started to say, this is enough. I have had enough. We are going to rebel until we are represented in Parliament. So America decides that they are going to go against Great Britain, and they dump tea overboard in the Boston Tea Party. They do all kinds of things to kind of get back at Great Britain. And eventually, we have our ponies that get together, our main ponies, our two big ponies over here, and they decide they are going to separate from Great Britain and form their own country. And that country is going to be called the United States of America, and they are going to not have a king, and they are going to do things very differently than Great Britain did. That's all I've got for you today, guys, on the Miss Myers Show. We're going to tune in next week when we are going to be talking about the foundations of the American political system and go over, you know, how we used the Magna Carta, the Declaration of Independence, the Mayflower contract, and how we use all those things to really establish the America that we know today. See you next week on the Miss Myers Show.